our donors and our donor base as a whole, not just recurring donors, are very passive. A lot of them don't really want to interact with us. I'm just curious thoughts that you might have about how I can better utilize those quarterly emails to just keep in contact with them and let them know about the impact of their gifts and their value, but also maybe try to connect with them a little bit more.
I do think there's a idea of community that we often see is important to donors. The feeling of community is different than the actual participation in said community. I would separate the two, but I would encourage you to think about stories, and I would encourage you just to not worry about spending too much time on it. Even if they don't respond, I do believe that that is valuable to donors. Karen Kelly, welcome to the Sustainable Giving Podcast.
Hi, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm excited for this one. The question that I think about is how does a lean, donor-centered monthly giving program become more scalable over time? And you and I have gotten to know each other over the LinkedIn and the social medias, which is such a beautiful thing. I'm so grateful for that, even as sometimes social media, can drain us a little bit. But one of the reasons I'm excited for this conversation is that your monthly giving program, which I'll have you talk about in a little bit, I think is a good example of something a lot of organizations need to hear. That sustainable giving doesn't require a massive team, complex technology or flashy incentives. Sometimes it just starts with clarity and consistency and having just a genuine care for donors. And so I'd love to spend our conversation just learning what you've built, and then just part of it thinking about what we might do to help your program continue to mature from here. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Awesome. Okay, so let's talk about the organization. Let's talk about Full Plates Giving Circle. Tell us a little bit about the organization and the program.
Sure. So I am currently the development manager at the Arundel County Food Bank. We're located in Crownsville, Maryland. So for people that are not familiar with Maryland, that's a central part of the state. It's where Annapolis, our state capital, is located. And it is right between Baltimore and Washington, D.C. And it is one of the wealthiest counties in the country. And yet about 11% of our residents struggle with food insecurity. And so
Mm.
we serve about 66,000 of our residents each year, with more than 4 million pounds of food. And that number actually just keeps growing. And we started the Full Plates Giving Circle a little over a year ago, because we saw that need to have that steady donations coming in. And we already had monthly donors, but there was no formal program and there was no outreach going to them. And there was nothing that was letting them know about the importance of their gift and the way that they were giving. And so that was something that I saw in my role. I started out at the food bank really focusing on data. When I joined the food bank, my role was database. And so I'm a data person. And so I look at all the data, I analyze all of that, and I see, okay, what can we do with this? And so one of the things that I saw was that we had over 200 monthly donors, and we weren't talking to them in any special way. They weren't receiving any kind of special outreach, and that was something that was really important that we put that together and let them know that the way they were giving was really important to sustaining our programs. And so we created the Full Plates Giving Circle.
Yeah. And this was, how many years ago was it?
It's been a little over a year. So we launched it
Oh,
March
that you
1st, 2025 is when we
okay.
formally launched the Full Plates Giving Circle.
Wow. Okay. Well, we're going to come back to that. I want to talk just a little bit about your path into fundraising and what has shaped the way you think about donors and long-term relationships.
Yeah, so like many people who are in fundraising, I did not set out to be a fundraiser. I think that my story, every time I tell my story, I hear a lot of, "Oh yeah, I didn't intend to be a fundraiser either." So,
Mhm.
my background's actually in higher education. I worked in several different capacities as a staff member. I worked in college athletics. I worked in admissions, alumni and development. I also taught as an adjunct faculty member for many, many years, and I actually have a doctorate in educational leadership. And it was right around the time that I was finishing my degree. I was teaching. I was working full time at a university. I had all of it going on. Figured my whole path forward was going to be in higher education, and life happened, as it does for everybody at some point, right? And my husband and I went through a devastating pregnancy loss, and in the aftermath of that, in while we were grieving and trying to figure out our way forward, we decided to start our own nonprofit organization. And so we spent many years, running that organization. And so I all of a sudden became a frontline fundraiser, just because it was necessary. And during that time, I never once considered myself a fundraiser. I was just the co-founder of the organization, and we needed money in order to
Yep.
have our programs run. And I think that I had a very stereotypical mindset of what a fundraiser was. And that's why I said, that's not me. To me, a fundraiser was somebody that was extroverted and, went out and just worked the room and could schmooze everybody. And that's the opposite of me. So anyone that knows me knows I'm introverted. And I said, I already told you I'm a data person. So I like sitting with my spreadsheets. And so I was like, no, there's no way I'm a fundraiser. Again, I'm just somebody that needs money so that our tiny little organization can exist, right? So
Yeah.
for all those years, I never once considered myself a fundraiser, and then a couple of years ago, I decided to step back from that role, move into a volunteer role at the organization, and move back into the workplace, and that's how I ended up at the food bank. And I started off, as I mentioned, working with the data, and then that evolved into working with a couple of different areas. I started doing some lapsed donor outreach. I started doing some donor stewardship, and of course, working with our recurring giving program. And after about a year of doing that and doing a lot of learning, a lot of just listening, and just kind of figuring things out and figuring out where I fit into everything, I had that moment of, you know what? I think I actually am a fundraiser. And it
Yeah.
took me all those years to get there. And I actually, you mentioned LinkedIn. I actually wrote a post on LinkedIn. This would be about a year ago. And I don't know if you remember it, because I tagged you because you're one of the people that I mentioned had been influential in my journey of learning.
Mm.
But I compared myself to Happy Gilmore because he spends the whole movie saying that, he's not a golfer, right? He's a hockey player. And I felt that was me. I said, "Oh, I'm not a fundraiser, I'm a database person," or,
I love that.
and finally it hit me. It's like, you know what? No, I am a fundraiser, because fundraisers encompass many different roles, right? And so data is a very important part of fundraising. And it took me a long time to get there, but I now embrace that and say, "Yes, I am a fundraiser." And so here I
I
am.
love that. Well, and how many of our listeners can relate to that? Well, yeah, that whatever your stereotype or perception of a what a quote unquote fundraiser is or a leader is, right? And then you realize that and I was just reminded of this quote this morning. A friend had posted about leadership, and I said my favorite quote from Patrick Lencioni, who's an author and a well-known leadership guy. I would argue he's one of the most influential management minds of our generation. He says the best kind of a leader is a self-aware one. I was like, oh, because we all want to think about, well, what are the traits? Are they extroverted? Are they well spoken? Are they whatever, right? Whatever those are they bold, And the reality is you can lead from many different places. And the fact that you've kind of seen that from your perspective as an introvert, as a data person, as a doctor. Can we call you doctor? Like, does that work?
You absolutely can. Usually the only people that call me that are my students and my mom. So if you'd like to, though, you absolutely can.
But that speaks to that, not just the data mind, but the wanting to understand and then apply what you've understood. And yet you're also in that place that so many charities are, especially food banks, especially human services charities that have been, frankly, historically left behind when it comes to sustainable recurring giving. And so that was the other reason I was excited to talk to you. Not only that you've invested over this past year plus in your program, in really building that out, which we're going to talk about, but frankly, you're in that kind of human services space, and I think there's a lot we can learn from that. So let's talk about Full Plates Giving Circle. What was the state of monthly giving before you hinted at that, right? You 200, I think, recurring donors at the time, but no real formal program. What was it like before? And then what caused you to to think about creating the program?
So when I came on board, we had data in a lot of different places. And when I say data, I mean we had recurring gifts coming in from multiple sources. And
Okay.
so our main database was Razor's Edge, but we also had gifts coming in from GiveSmart because there had been a text to give campaign set up in 2020 during COVID. That was still running. We had people giving through PayPal. We just had a lot of gifts coming in various ways, and it was kind of a mess. And so one of the things that we did in general with all of our donations was we moved everything into one central spot the best that we could. And we changed our database. We're now with Donor Perfect, and so we got everything in one location and cleaned up that data considerably. And because we can't look at patterns, we can't look at donor history and that if it's all over the place. And before I came on board, we didn't have a dedicated person to look at that data. So it was really important to me to be able to come in first and just clean everything up. And we spent a really good 6, 7 months getting all that data in one place, getting it nice and clean, and said the best that we could. And from there, we looked at it and said, wow, we have about 200 people giving to us every single month. And from what I had started to learn through all of my reading and my connecting and on LinkedIn and everything, I said, I think we really need to look at putting together a program. And it actually was part of a bigger plan to do more outreach. So, I mentioned we didn't have a data person. We really didn't have anybody to do dedicated outreach to donors either. Our team had been extremely small prior to just a few years ago. And so we've grown a lot in the last few years. Our services have grown a lot. And so fortunately, our staff has grown a lot in the last few years as well. So we're able to do a lot more. But we had donors who had given during the pandemic, so 2020, 2021, who we're not sure if they ever heard from the food bank again. And, so we had this whole plan of, just reaching out to different segments of donors. And one of them was our monthly donors.
Yeah.
And, we took the time to really think about what we wanted the program to look like. I had wanted to launch it in the fall of 2024 and it didn't happen. But we didn't want to rush it because we wanted to make sure that we picked a name that was right. We created a logo that was right, that we really created that feel and that identity and figured out, okay, what are we going to do for our donors instead of just saying, okay, well, you're a monthly giver, you're now part of the full plates giving circle. What does that mean?
Hmm.
And as you said, we really pride ourselves on being donor centric in the sense that it's really important to us to say thank you a lot and to let donors know of the impact of their gift. And those are things that don't have to cost any money and don't have to take a lot of time. And that was also really important because this is just one of many things that I do every day. And so
Mhm.
figuring out what that plan looked like took a little bit longer than maybe we had hoped for. But in the long run, when we were ready to launch it, we were ready to go and we had a really solid plan. And said planning is key for me. I have to have my plan. So it was really important to have that all in place and be ready to go.
Yeah. Well, and getting that, doing it right. I just was speaking with a charity we're working with this week, and we're advising them through a process of designing and developing their new recurring giving program. And it's so interesting because there is this kind of feeling of like, I just got to get this thing out. We just got to get it done. And yet we want to do it right. I've seen organizations that, go in their what we call program design for their recurring giving program and they rush it. They don't talk to donors. It's not really infused with donor kind of the donor's voice. And it takes a year to figure out why it's not working, and just because we wanted to save, 4 or 6 weeks early on in the process. And yet at the same time, often there's tactics that we can be doing today. Like we don't have to have a named program to be able to say monthly giving, and invite people to step in. So you launched the program in March of 2025, formalized your recurring donors into a named monthly giving community. I'm curious, the name, the Full Plates Giving Circle, what was that meant to communicate?
So we just wanted people to know that their donations mean that our neighbors in our county are going to have food on their plates. And not just once, but every month. And our symbol has that plate full of food, and just letting people know it's an abundance of not only food, but of love, of gratitude from our organization, to let people know like how much it means. It's meant to just be an abundance of, as said, not just the physical food, but of our community. This is really about people coming together and supporting others in our county. And so we decided that we wanted something that symbolized that, in terms of, this is a circle, in the sense of we're all in this together, and this is within our community here in our county. And so
Yeah.
we decided we really like that symbolism, of not only the name but also the logo that goes along with it.
Right. Well, and circle, right? Circle plate is circular, circular, ongoing. Was there any, by the way, kind of conscious thought about the concept of giving circles? I know we've talked about that a little bit on the show, or has that shown up at all in your world? I'm just curious.
Not really. I think that I'm trying to remember now back. We talked about a lot of different names, and I think that,
Right.
we looked at some like alliteration, and we didn't really talk a whole lot about the giving circles. I think it just, it went with that image of the plate and everything just being, circular and kind of continuous, and it sort of just all fell into place.
Okay. No,
So
that makes
it was
sense.
that easy.
Well, talk a little bit about, so you're a little over a year into that process, really investing in seeing the opportunity. What have been the results? Where's the program today?
So we've seen a lot of growth in the last 15 months that we've been running the program. And so I think one of the biggest things for us has been that we make the ask. We put it out in a lot of different places, and not just passively. Of course, everybody has a monthly giving button or option or something on the website, on the giving form, but we make sure that we put it as an option, anytime there's an opportunity to talk to people. So if we have an event, I might talk to a donor one on one about, hey, we have the full plates giving circle. Here's why you might want to join it. Every month we have an e-newsletter that goes out, and there's a section about full plates giving circle. And it's not just a little button at the bottom that's kind of easy to miss. It's a section that talks very briefly, but it's there. It has our logo, and it talks about giving monthly. And sometimes the wording changes a little bit. We talked recently about the changes in the tax breaks this year, and how you could break that down and you could give monthly and add that up. Sometimes it's simply just you can give monthly, because some people don't even think about that as an option. And, it's just putting it in front of people constantly and reminding them that it is an option, and making it easy for them to sign up for that as well.
Yeah.
We put a post out on LinkedIn every month that celebrates our new members and our members who have upgraded their gift. And it doesn't mention them by name. It just talks about the number of people who have joined us and the number who have upgraded. But it also reminds everybody this is why it's important. And if you'd like to join our community, here's the link that you can join us. And so I think it's just been the consistency about getting that out in front of people, and just putting it as a reminder of, hey, this is a really great way to give, and this is why.
Yeah. Well, and and as you and I offlined, you've seen some pretty incredible growth with the program. I think was it in the 50% range,
Right around
year over
there.
year,
And yeah.
and significant retention. You mentioned 91% retention, and that, by the way, that 50% growth is in both. Is in revenue. I think the number of donors actually grew more than 50%, if I recall correctly, which is just very encouraging. So what would you, when you look back on the first year, because people are listening to this and they're where you were 15 months ago, Karen, right? And they're like, I think this is for me. I think if we could do this right, that this could create some results for us. If you look back at the last year, what are some of the couple things that you're like, okay, we did 20 things or 10 things or whatever, but really these 2 or 3 felt like they moved the needle the most?
Ooh, good question. Um, I think that probably having it really visible on our donate every donation form for us.
Mhm.
So it's not just an option on the website, as it's a separate form if you go to the monthly giving page. but it's also an option on the main giving page. But every time we create a donation form for a community fundraiser of any sort, so we have a lot of different groups in our community that do their own fundraisers for us. It's always an option on there as well. I think don't discount any avenue for
Yeah.
recurring giving. I think that's the biggest thing. I think sometimes we're our own worst enemies in that we think, oh, well, these people aren't going to want to sign up for recurring giving. We've had a lot of brand new donors sign up as recurring donors. And so I think just being open to the idea that people might come into recurring giving from a lot of different ways. And put it out there, make it an option, and if they wanna choose it, they can choose it. If they don't want to, that's fine too, but, especially I said, if you're starting out and you're tight on time, you're tight on resources, don't discount any option, put it out there everywhere, and don't worry about having tons of stuff for people. Not everybody wants tchotchkes. We know with our donor group, and we've been told from people before, they don't want a lot of stuff. They don't want a lot of events. They just don't want the fanfare. Some of them don't even want to hear from us, frankly. They don't even want us to
Mhm.
call them. They're like, no, I just want
Right.
to give you my donation and I want you to do good with it. And it's really funny because we're like, no, we want to call and thank you, and
Yeah,
they're like, no, no, it's okay. But I think that sometimes, you can get very overwhelmed thinking about all the things that you can do. I know I've sat through a lot of webinars and such where there are some great representatives from these organizations that are saying, well, we did this, this, and this. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, there's no way we have the time to do this. We just don't have the staff to do this. And, it can be a little discouraging sometimes because you think, well, I can't keep up with that. But, I'm here to say that you don't have to have all of those things. You don't have to have special events for your monthly donors. We keep things fairly simple. We do a lot of email communications. So we do every quarter, there's a special email that goes out that I send out to our monthly donors. It's actually a very simple email, but it's just a touch point to let people know one, we appreciate them because I think you can never say thank you enough to people, but to let them know about the impact of their gift, in different ways. Sometimes it's a really easy email. After we've closed the fiscal year, we can say, "Hey, here's the impact from the previous fiscal year." Sometimes it's a little more, storytelling, but it's just a quick touch point. And I always invite people, if you want to reach out, if you want to come in for a tour, but I always make sure, give them my information.
Mhm.
I'm here to help you, to serve you. I said I'm like your personal concierge. If you need something, call me, email me, so that they know where to go. And I think that's something else that's really important is, be available. Make sure that if a donor reaches out about something, get back to them. I've had so many donors call in to update their credit card, and they're so surprised if I miss their call and I call them back right away. They're like, "Wow, thanks for getting back to me so quickly." And I'm like, "Well, how long did you think I was gonna wait to call you?" But to them, they thought that I called them back really quickly, and which is great, but, I know sometimes people you get bogged down and you miss getting back to people or things like that. I think it's really important to stay on top of all of that. These are all the little things that you can do, I said, that don't cost anything. And so, I said I've mentioned before, I'm a planner. I have a lot of spreadsheets. I have a lot of things on my calendar to remind me to do them, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly. Those are all the things that, smaller organizations that don't have big staff can focus on doing. And I think that that's really helped us to grow our program and to grow the trust of our donors. And they know that we really care about them and we care about, the impact that they're making on our community.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, one of the things that you and I talked about really for this particular episode, this conversation wasn't necessarily doing like a live consultation, but creating space to just think together about Full Plates Giving Circle and where it might go from here. So, I asked if you would bring a couple questions for me, either things you're wrestling with or wondering about or trying to decide as the program matures. So, um, it, what's the first question you had on your list for me?
Yeah, so I wrote a few down in preparation and then something came up today. So I'm going to call an audible and ask you a different question to
I
start.
love a good
Oh,
audible.
because, is that this is, they said, this is real life, right? It happened to me this afternoon and kind of, I said, oh, yeah, this would be a good question for Dave. So, if you have a donor, they're already giving monthly. and they reach out and say, "You know what? I think I'm going to start giving once a year or maybe twice a year." How do you handle that? Because they're not saying I'm going to stop supporting you, but they're changing the way that they're giving. And to
Oh,
them, there
interesting.
might not be a
Yeah,
difference. To me, I'm like, no, I want you to keep giving monthly because I want to grow my program and I have goals, but to them, it's the same difference whether they're giving, monthly or they're giving in a lump sum. So
yeah.
I pretty much don't have a response for them other than, sure, no problem. But
Sure, sure.
is there a way that you would approach that?
Well, I'm curious. First of all, and I'm assuming I think I know the answer to this, but is this person saying I want to, instead of giving one time, automated per month, I'm going to give one time automated per year? Or are they saying I just want, do you have an option where I can give in, December and,
No, so we
June?
only have automated option for monthly on our
Okay.
donation form. So they would be giving manually, most likely through our website or
Sure.
possibly a check. We have a lot of check writers still in our donor base, but they would be making that gift once a year on
Yeah.
their own.
Okay. Well, a couple of principles. First of all, I do think donors, when you ask the donors, and we've started to do this in research, like we'll talk about recurring giving or even monthly giving, but people tend to think of themselves, well, yeah, I'm a recurring giver. It's like meaning I've given more than once at any time ever, right? And so
Mhm.
they don't necessarily understand our industry lingo, right? Um, I I do find that donors tend to think of themselves, as a more faithful recent donor than they tend to actually be, right? And I've seen that for 20 years in fundraising. You say, "When was the last time you gave?" "Oh yeah, it was just like in the last last year or so." And it's like, "It's been 5 years." Ah, right, you look at the data. So I think there's, on one hand, um, donors tend to think of themselves as maybe more active than they truly are, and I think that's just a reality. I don't know there's anything to do with that, but there is a reason I don't refer to it as monthly giving. I do talk about sustainable giving or recurring giving because increasingly donors are choosing to give at different frequencies. For some people, that monthly kind of cadence is great. It's very subscription oriented. It's just comfortable. A lot of people give monthly, and that's great. But some people, they're a gig worker or they run their own business and they have different, like uneven income, right? Or they might be in real estate or what have you. And so, first of all, I think we just want to meet donors where they're at. However, I would encourage, and you guys are kind of in the early stages of this, but what would it look like to have a month, an annual or quarterly automated gift option? Now, would I bend over backwards for one donor to create an automated gift? No. But we do see a trend towards donors wanting to give at whatever frequency is comfortable for them. So to even have a fallback to say, did you know that we can set up that gift, your basic gift annually, or is an option that you might consider. But otherwise, it's like you offer donors, choice. So if they call in, it's like, hey, we have hopefully you've got a couple options. You can pause your gift or you can move to a different frequency, or you can change your gift amount. But if donors want to change, if that's where they're at, it's like, that's great, and let them do what they're most comfortable with. That's what I would say.
Okay, yeah, I think that's great. When we set up our form, we most of our donors were monthly, and so we naturally just gravitated toward offering that as an option
Which
because it
is
was cleaner for us,
Yeah, and frankly, I
honestly.
think I've seen some data, but it's a vast majority, we'll say, of recurring gifts are monthly. That's the most common default option. Some of the larger charities are actually increasingly experimenting with annual. I've even seen, on the other end of the spectrum, I've seen charities experimenting with weekly recurring giving, which I think is really interesting. And that's like the most present example of that would be in the last election cycle. There were multiple kind of elections fundraisers that said, "Hey, it's 11 weeks to go to the election. Would you give weekly?" Which makes a lot more sense than, would you give monthly? Well, is that 3 or 4 gifts? Like that's not very
Mhm.
many before an election. And so even just being creative about it, but frankly, it's like, hey, let's meet donors where they're at. Let's give them the choice, and some donors aren't going to choose monthly.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I'm guessing that we would not necessarily have a base of people who would be interested in, say, like a weekly option, but I could definitely see a quarterly or an annual option. I know we previously had maybe like 3 or 4 quarterly ones, but kind of then to piggyback off of that, I feel like it gets a little harder to manage it, but not necessarily. We do a lot of the same outreach for everybody. I shouldn't say a lot. We do the same outreach for everybody. So I'm just like thinking out loud now here.
Yeah.
Like, are there any issues as far as tracking or any kind of outreach when donors are at different frequencies?
There are some more complexities. The first one is just, does my donation platform offer that? It's an easy option, or is that a manual thing? So that's the first one. And then the second is, yeah, just thinking through, okay, what is the receipt email that's going to happen? What is our thank you cadence? I would still treat them as they're still a faithful, in this case, Full Plates Giving Circle member. They're still giving, they're going to get the updates. And then it would be more the kind of triggered things like a receive email or those sorts of individual gift thank yous would probably change. But what you don't want to do is make it more complicated for you or for donors. It's more just offering that kind of flexibility. In fact, at the end of the book, The Rise of Sustainable Giving, one of the things I talked about was donors are just going to continue to expect that they will be able to give in the ways that they're most comfortable. And I do think alternative giving frequencies is something we're seeing on the rise.
Are you looking to build a thriving recurring giving program but not sure where to start? I want to introduce you today to the Sustainable Giving Self-Assessment. Developed from years of research and thousands of hours of experience, this short assessment is for nonprofit leaders and fundraisers who want to build a long-lasting stream of sustainable recurring revenue. Go to sustainablegiving.org to take this free assessment. It's just 30 questions and takes 7 minutes. Afterward, you'll receive a personalized report on the state of your recurring giving program and what areas you should focus on. Are you ready to get clarity on how to grow sustainable giving? Go online and take the assessment today at sustainablegiving.org.
What's another question? I think we have time for one or two more.
Okay, so I mentioned that we do quarterly email updates. And so these go out to all of our Full Plates Giving Circle members, regardless of how much they give. So our members range from, our smallest gift is $5 a month, and our largest is
Okay.
$3,250 a month. So we have a wide variety of donors in our program.
Wow.
And our donor base as a whole, not just recurring donors, but as a whole, are very passive. A lot of them don't really want to interact with us. And so when I started doing the quarterly emails, I did very small call to actions. Hey, come out for a tour, connect with me on LinkedIn. One month we asked if they would share, a sentence about why they give monthly as opposed to one time so that we could use those to maybe encourage some other people. I got 0 responses to that. Nobody wants to connect on LinkedIn with me. And, it's just,
Mhm.
it's always crickets when we put those call to actions in. So, maybe that's just not something that they're looking for. But I'm now that we've been doing these for over a year, I'm struggling a little bit with finding ways to be a little bit original with content in these emails. So,
Mhm.
they already get every month on their receipt that they get, their automated receipt, they do get an update with the previous month's statistics. So, how many
Okay.
pounds of food did we distribute? There's usually a quick story from one of our network partners in there. So they're getting an update about the impact of their gifts every month already.
Yep.
I'm just curious thoughts that you might have about how I can better utilize those quarterly emails to, just keep in contact with them and let them know about the impact of their gifts and their value, but also maybe try to connect with them a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you're not alone. I do think there's a idea of community that we often see is important to donors. This feeling of I'm a part of a thing. However, the feeling of community is different than the actual participation in said community. And I find many nonprofits. I can only think of a very frankly, I can only think of one or two nonprofits that have anything that I would call an actual community where the donors actually get together or they show up to the thing or they attend the thing. And so I would separate the two. I think the feeling of community and being a part of this giving circle and being a part of this community could still be very strong messaging. Just recognize that people are busy and, they're not gonna respond to the thing. In fact, one of the questions that I had, and I'm just thinking out loud here, is, sometimes when we message people too far apart, they actually don't respond because they just don't see it, right? Because it's sort of not top of mind. Now, I'm not suggesting you go from quarterly to monthly. Now we got to come up with more excuses to invite them. But just as an observation, I do think sometimes when we have infrequent messages, which quarterly seems like a lot to us, but to donors, it's pretty easy to kind of lose those. I would encourage you to think about what do stories look like? I think you've already got that built into the monthlies. You mentioned network partners. I don't know if these are stories of individuals. I'm sure that can be difficult at times, but I would encourage you to think about stories, and I would encourage you just to not worry about spending too much time on it. I do think any options you have for them to engage that don't require additional work, like come down for a tour, tell me why you give, like even if they don't respond, I do believe that that is valuable to donors. And then occasionally they do. We had one charity I've mentioned before on the show that they did a donor trip, and they were already doing the donor trip, and it was primarily major and mid donor focused. But they said, why don't we invite our monthly donors if anyone wants to come with us on the trip? The donor did. That ultimately donor ended up becoming a major donor to the organization, and that happens. But just as often, it's the crickets. You're like, where'd they go? Like, why aren't they responding? And I wouldn't ascribe too much, kind of intent there. I think it's just the donors are busy.
Yeah, I know as a donor, when I get emails from organizations I give to, I said this before to my husband. I was like, a lot of times I just delete the emails, and I feel horrible
Yeah.
saying that because it's like I support the work that they do, but frankly, I don't necessarily need to open the email. I'm still
Well, and
get my donation.
and I think we just need a modern conception of how emails work today. They're very much like, Twitter was in the old days. I've never been a big Twitter or X user, I guess. Mostly because I just can't stand the idea of this stream of like stuff that I miss, and you catch out, you dip in whenever you want. And I think email, for good or for bad, and probably for both, has become that kind of stream. And so, whether people open our thing, yes, we want to be as engaging as possible, but sometimes they're just seeing subject lines, and maybe that's just enough, and so I think the tipping into community, inviting community, but do it in a way that doesn't, you're not spending your whole time being the community manager. You've got other things to do.
Great. Do you have time for one more question?
Yeah, we have time for one more. Let's do one more, I think.
Okay. Well, I have the ultimate question that everybody always asks. We want to grow our full plates giving circle. So we've had a lot of success first year. Where do we go from here? We have limited time, we have limited resources. Year two, sophomore slump. What else can we do that we're not already doing?
I love this. And I have far more questions to answer that than we will have airtime, but I will give you some principles. When we do, just for our listeners, when we do what we call our sustainable giving assessment, where we're really looking at that, we look at 10 different areas, and ask questions along 10 different kind of dimensions. And then we go across, there's upwards of 17 different channels we're looking at when we're trying to answer that question. So I'm not going to do the 10 areas or 17 channels. That'd be too much. But I would just ask you this, Karen. In what ways does the food bank get in front of the community? What are some places, either physical or times on the calendar or venues, where you find yourself intersecting with the community?
So we have a mobile pantry that goes out into the community 4 to 5 times a month, approximately, and does direct distribution. Outside of that, we function more as a hub. So I mentioned we have network partners, and I probably should have explained that a little bit more. So
Mhm.
they are smaller pantries throughout our community that we supply the food to, and then they distribute it directly. So
Okay.
we don't have a lot of direct contact necessarily with the neighbors that we're serving. So a lot of getting out in front of the community is more of, if our communications manager is sending out a story to the press and they pick it up, if we're posting on social media. We have a partnership with our school district here where every fall they do a big food drive for us. That's been a longstanding partnership. But, that is one of the struggles that we face, is that we are not necessarily out and about in the community on a daily basis, interacting with the people that we serve. A lot of it is indirect. And so,
Yeah.
a lot of us are in the office doing work at computers. And so that's a struggle.
Yeah. And then tell me a little bit about donor acquisition. Do you have a program that invites people into giving at least a single gift to the organization through whether it's direct mail or digital or phone or otherwise?
We don't have anything in place right now that is, us really reaching out to people. Most of it is people coming to us. And I realize that we're very fortunate that we have new donors coming to us without doing much, but that's the
Hmm.
nature of what we do. So, in the fall, we had the government shutdown. We had a lot of new donors that came to us because they saw the need in our community and they saw the work that we were doing. And so they came to us. But that was a one off situation. It's kind of like I said, when we had the pandemic, there was a big rush of donors coming in because they knew the need in the community. We saw the same thing in the fall. But those times in between, we really just rely on our existing donor base and, people just knowing about us and knowing about the work that we're doing. And we really don't have anything in place to to go out and bring new donors into our organization.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting when we think about growing a program, we think about acquisition, meaning inviting new donors straight into our first gift. Really, the only way we can do that is if we're getting in front of individuals, right? And so that's an area that I would encourage you to think about is, are there natural places? Sometimes there's just the people take for granted. They're like, oh yeah, we do that one concert every year, or like we do. We're in churches or whatever those things are. So look for places where you have natural places where you're in front of people. Whether or not it's a fundraising situation or not is kind of besides the point at first. Um, or are there places that pretty easily you could be in front of people? And I do mean sometimes I mean physically, like we host a gala or we do an event or we have a concert or whatever, that can be one. But also just kind of metaphorically, like, oh, we have a big presence, everybody knows us online, the local news stations love to cover us at the holidays, right? So think about that. And that's on the acquisition side. On the conversion side, that is much more. If we do have people coming in and giving us a single gift, how are we immediately inviting them into full plates giving circle? What does that look like right now? If somebody comes in, they give a first gift, it's a $20 gift or $100 gift. Um, what does that look like in terms of how quickly do they hear about full plates giving circle, or or this is just more like you're in the stream and you're going to hear about it as you hear about it?
So they do get a welcome email, usually relatively quickly, within 48 business hours typically. And one of the mentions in the welcome email is about joining the Full Plates Giving Circle. One of the things I'll be working on in the upcoming months is building out that new donor welcome series so that there are separate emails for some of those. And one of those separate emails will be about joining Full Plates. But right now, they do learn about it relatively quickly, but again, it's up to them to click the link to really
Yep, and it's
get
kinda
through
like,
and
"Hey, this
learn
is one of
about
the
it.
things we do," and so I would encourage you, and this is not this would not be my final answer. If this was a true assessment, I'd have a lot more questions. But just from this conversation, what I would say is one of the things you should very much consider doing is, what does it look like to not only invite new donors into Full Plates Giving Circle, but do so very concretely, very directly, multiple times within the first 60 days of the new donor's first gift and incentivize that conversion. Let me tell you what I mean by incentivize that conversion. I don't mean give them a tote bag. Although if you have identity swag, great, you can give them that. But one of my favorite strategies is to have a donor lined up that offers a matching gift, which is a very common fundraising strategy. However, this is a special one. This is a matching gift only for new giving circle members that choose to partner with the organization. And so not only now are you asking them directly, because a lot of organizations are like, by the way, PS, we have a monthly giving program, or it's like a sidebar article. It's not an actual ask. Like we're not asking them to join the program and make an ongoing impact. So that's the biggest thing I think you can do, and be willing to do it multiple times, not just did they, to your point, did they see the one email,
Mhm.
It's like, no, 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 we're going to invite them multiple times. We're going to make it a clear, kind of unambiguous ask. Like, this is a bold ask. And by the way, I've talked to donors, like when they make that decision to partner with the organization, that's not because they got badgered into it. It's because they feel like, now I'm making an ongoing impact. The most likely window, and I've talked about this before, that a new donor is going to convert to choose to give monthly is in the first 30 days. And that, I believe, my hypothesis is that's because that's when they're at their height of interest. Like they're the most interested because they just chose to give a first gift. But then also, what can you do to kind of incentivize that conversion, add a little bit of urgency? Like, hey, we've got a donor that's agreed to, to partner with us to double the first gift of any new Giving Circle partner in the first, you know, in this month or by year end, or, it just depends on when you're doing it.
So that was gonna be my question. Would the match be for the first gift that they give?
There's a lot of different ways to do it. I think the most simple thing is to say matching the first gift of any new monthly partner. I have not seen any evidence that, well, if we match, the first 6 months or the first 12 months, I've not seen any evidence that that makes like that big of a difference. And so I would just keep it simple. You don't want to confuse donors. Like, what? How does the math work? And it's like, well, you're doubling their gift. And I think the way with the most integrity is just to say the first gift, because they can do that math.
I love
Yeah.
it. That's a great
Yeah.
idea.
Well, Karen, again, thank you for just being willing to do this and be vulnerable a little bit and talk about what's working. And okay, well, how do we figure this out? Because I think it's very easy for people to feel like, well, no, 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 I need to be the perfect case study. It's only up and to the right, and it's like, honestly, sometimes you have these little stair steps, where it's like, yes, we had growth, that's wonderful, and now what do we do next? Like, that's the same thing that got us here is not going to get us there. So appreciate you.
Absolutely.
So let's kind of, as we wrap up our time, for a nonprofit leader who's listening here, right, and they're in the shoes that you were in 15 months ago, they have recurring donors, no formal program. What would you tell them to do first?
Just get started and have some kind of plan, which those sound very contradictory.
Yeah,
But like you said, sometimes you overthink. I'm an overthinker. You overthink it. You worry about everything being perfect. You worry about having everything in place, having, the name and all that. Just get started. And you can have a plan that gives you some of those elements, and you can build it as you go along. But get it out there. Just get going. And even if you're starting with 0 recurring donors, just get it out there and just, work on getting the first one, and just go from there. And don't worry about, that tremendous growth, or don't worry about, oh, I have to do different levels of I've seen different, programs that have, based on the amount that people give every month, and they have different outreach for those different groups, and that seems very overwhelming to me. And I mentioned we do the same outreach for everybody in our program regardless of the amount they give, so you can keep it really simple. So just don't overthink it. Like I said, as an overthinker, I know it's hard to tell people not to do that, but just get out there and do it. But also do think about it a little bit before you jump in. Have a plan, because you have to be consistent with it. I think that's something that's really important. Because if you jump in and you're all gung ho for a month or two, and then all of a sudden everything drops off, your program is not going to be successful. It definitely takes consistency, and it's something that you have to look at long term. It's not going
yeah,
to be everyone's just going to rush in and join your program immediately, and then that's it. It's great if that happens, but likely that's not going to happen. So, it takes a while. The first several months that we launched our program, we were having maybe 4, 5, 6 people join every month, and that was with doing a lot of work to ask people to join it. And it really took a while for us to see those numbers increase. But consistency is key. Just stay with it, and just know that you don't have to go all out and do every single idea that you hear about, because you kind of want to. There's a lot of really cool ideas of things you can do for your donors out there, but you don't have to. And you can still
yeah.
be really successful with keeping your program simple.
Well, thinking about the future, what What would you love the program to make possible for the food bank? Let's fast forward 3 years, and let's say that you've really kind of created the future you hope for what's possible. What does the program look like in 3 years?
I would love for everyone to know about the Full Plates Giving Circle. I think that there's so many people, even within our food bank community that just don't even know yet about it. And we've been, as if we're talking about it left and right. And like you said, people just there's so much out there. And so it's easy to miss the message. But I would like people to understand that the impact of monthly giving is that we can have this consistent stream of income that allows us to not only provide for our neighbors every month, but when we do have those, crisis moments, when we have government shutdowns, when we have SNAP benefits cut, when we have those, those moments that people are really struggling and they need extra help, that we're able to jump in. And that allows us to do that because we know what's coming in terms of donations. And so I would love it to just be a source of pride and for it to be a really big group of donors that just understand that that need is real because unfortunately in the food insecurity world we don't know what's going to happen. And as much as we like to say that this is something that is going to go away. Unfortunately, I said we're just serving more and more people. It's tough out there. People are really struggling, even people that are working and, they're, it's just really hard to make ends meet right now. And so we don't know what the future holds for the people that we serve. And so I would love for the Full Plates Giving Circle to just be a powerhouse and be able to fuel not only our regular programs, but those one-off programs when we have emergencies and we need to step in and we need to fund those programs as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, steady monthly revenue changes the way organizations plan or respond to community need, right? And that's what you've
Absolutely.
encapsulated. That's what I'm passionate about. That's what I think is the opportunity, specifically within the nonprofit space, human services charities, like the food bank. We're at a moment both of crisis, but also of opportunity. And I'm glad that you've seen that and you're invested in that. Much more to come, right? You're on your journey. You're a little more than a year in. I've said it before, but I don't think I've ever met a nonprofit that doesn't have recurring donors. The question is, are you paying attention to it? Are you thinking about it? Are you looking to grow it? Because every one of those new donors, depending on the report you read, is going to stick around for 5 to 8 to 9 years. And it's something that really changes the complexion of what a charity's able to do as a result.
Absolutely.
Well, great. Well, kind of one final question as we wrap up. Before we go there, how can people find out more about the food bank and about Full Plates Giving Circle?
Sure. So our website is aafoodbank.org. And if you want to add slash monthly onto that, you'll get right to
There you
our Full
go.
Plates Giving Circle page. Also, if anybody wants to reach out to me directly, absolutely happy to talk one on one about that. And you can reach me via email, Karen at aafoodbank.org, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Karen J. Kelly, because Karen Kelly is a popular name. So we'll put that J in there.
Yeah.
But no, we're always happy to share the work that we're doing in our community and connect with anyone that would like to learn more about our organization or our giving program.
Well, I will say, as somebody who's seen you and interacted, and you and I have interacted for a while, I just appreciate how you show up with generosity, in community. And I don't just mean generosity as a financial thing, but generosity of time, of trust, of connections. And I think about, your heart and literally through the heart, right? The charity you founded and the work and the experience that you and your husband went through that led to then how do we actually invest in others, and that's really meaningful. And I would encourage people to look up through the heart as well. But as we come to kind of a close here, Karen, my last question for you is, what gives you hope when you think about this group of donors showing up month after month?
There are a lot of people in our community that genuinely care about other people. And it's really heartwarming to see the way that people show up. Listen, not just with financial donations, but the way they volunteer their time. We're very blessed that we have such an amazing community that rallies around us because, as I said, it's hard out there. There are a lot of people that are struggling, and it's hard for people to ask for help. And to see so many people step up and help in a time when, we talk about how, people aren't connected to one another. We hear that all the time. And I'm like, it's really heartwarming to see that people really do care about other people. And it does give me hope that, maybe this is something that we'll be able to tackle down the road, and that, we just, as a community, we can continue to show up for one another and support one another. And, we're just continuing to do the best we can and try to expand our services the most that we can and help everyone. And I'm really grateful to everyone that's, a donor to our organization, a volunteer with our organization, that allows us to go to work every day and do the work that we do, because it's really meaningful to me to be able to help our community through the work that I do. And it's really genuinely just a feel good thing when people, say how much it means to them to be able to be a member of the Full Plates Giving Circle. And that really warms my heart. And so it's great when people say, no, thank you. Thank you for the work you're doing, when you're trying to thank them and everyone's just thanking each other. And it's just a really nice feeling. And it's great to see people supporting one another.
Well, generosity begets generosity, right? And I love seeing that. I love the circular nature of it. I love the fact that you thought about that in the work that you do and in the giving circle. So thank you, and I hope our listeners picked up something today, and just appreciate you keeping on.
Yeah, well, thank you. I've learned so much from you, and I have really enjoyed talking with you today. This has been a great conversation.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Sustainable Giving Podcast. I hope you found the information helpful and that you're able to walk away with insights that you can use to start building a steady stream of recurring revenue for your organization. For even more resources to help you build a thriving recurring giving program, go online to sustainablegiving.org. That's sustainablegiving.org. And lastly, if a leader comes to mind that you think would benefit from this episode, would you do me a favor? Would you share this episode with them? Just that little act could be the difference they need to start growing sustainable recurring giving for their own organization. Until next time, thanks for joining us.